Our next speaker, Michael Teys. Michael is one of Australia's leading strata experts, working for corporate owners of strata property, property professionals and strata managers. His consultancy provides advice, research and training on complex strata issues. Please, Michael.
Thank you. It's good to be here with old friends and new friends. And this is the first time that I've been asked to speak for the REI, and I'm delighted to be here. Slide 1. There's a particular moment in the 7:30 report expose on strata management fees where the strata management race to the bottom was won. The winning moment comes at 11 minutes and 8 seconds into the interview, where Stephen Brell says, "I know today that you have disclosed a few things which again have made me feel really awkward." He then goes on to say, "And I'm going to go back and look at our practices and tidy things up." This is a race that has been going on in strata management for at least 39 years, the entirety of my career in strata. It is a race in which those competing hold their base fee low and seek to profit from additional charges. In the 80s and 90s, when I was learning my craft as a strata lawyer, the additional charges were confined to extras, the so-called Schedule Bs, deriving their name from the SCA agreement. By the new millennium, those intent on winning the strata race to the bottom started to take steroids. Their roids of choice were related party transactions and kickbacks. Owning law firms and debt collection agencies and facilities management companies was the way the race was run. And I'm embarrassed to say that for a time as the owner of some strata management companies, I was once part of that race. More lately, the race has turned to insurance brokerage, fire safety firms, and other types of advisors to the owners' corporations, which the strata managers have a duty to manage as a fiduciary agent. The light of public scrutiny on these methods was shone on the 21st of March this year when Nina Howell spoke to the ABC. And since then there has been a flurry of activity, and on the part of some, inactivity. The call for professionalism of strata management is loud, from both within and outside. It's a strong call, but it's a call that comes at a difficult time for those of us involved in strata. For there are uncontrollable world events that affect us in the way in which we do our jobs. And I've studied these over the last couple of years, both here in Australia and in my work in England and in Canada and in Spain. There is a resistance by owners to fund and undertake repair and maintenance. In Chicago, this has become such a problem that a concept of decondification has been termed, where buildings are selling their stratas that are unrepairable to developers who are then converting them to build-to-rent facilities. In a different context, we've seen David Chandler order a new building here in New South Wales unfit for an occupation certificate that has also been converted to a build-to-rent facility. And of course in Florida, where Champlain Towers once stood, the condo board there knew at least 5 years of serious structural defects and did nothing, and 92 people died when their podium collapsed. This reluctance to repair and maintain comes at a time when our buildings are ageing. City Futures data tells us that 60% of schemes in New South Wales were registered before 2000. They are getting old, and like us, they need money spent on them. We, of course, are managing buildings at a time when building defects and unsafe products are being experienced by owners and talked about in the press. There are improvements that have been made by the Building Commissioner that will benefit new builds. But there are unresolved and unintended consequences of some of that legislation, namely the Design and Building Practitioners Act, which is causing difficulties for strata managers and suppliers doing remedial work. It's also interesting that there's been a disappointing uptake in the project remediation solution for combustible cladding. Despite it being a well thought through policy, it has been met with resistance at a cost point by strata committees. The world events in which we find ourselves also see an increasing amount of regulation. Each time something goes wrong, we run to government and we ask government to solve the problem. And they do so by patchwork legislation. I have no doubt that the bill that Christine discussed with the Minister this afternoon, or the Minister's advisors this afternoon, will be a complete mess. It will be a piece of rubbish that tries to tape over a problem without addressing the real issue. Government legislation doesn't solve problems in the main, it causes more. And we have more and more regulation without research, without thinking, without going to the root cause of a problem, without independent thought and rigour. And that must change. We are also dealing with environmental issues that we are increasingly being called upon as strata managers to manage buildings that are in a renewal and redevelopment phase, where there are sustainability retrofits, net zero targets. One day someone will explain to me what that means. Electric vehicle charging, portable batteries, all of these things make our work harder. But there is a pathway to professionalism. It's a well-worn path. It's a path that was first studied by an academic called Pound in the 50s, and his work has been taken up and developed since. The definition of a profession, according to the Australian College of Professions, requires 5 things, which I want to outline for you tonight. The first is a clear public good. Whatever we may think of other professionals individually, we know that the legal profession stands for the pursuit of justice. We know that the medical profession stands for the saving of lives. We know that clerics work for the salvation of their flock. What is the public good that strata managers service? Done well, I believe strata management has a fundamental bearing on the well-being of society and on our human right to shelter. Done poorly, strata management causes distress and conflict that affects our homes and the places at which we work and play. The answer to the question that I've posed is one that requires great thought and deep debate. I think it's got more to do with our sense of place and well-being than it does with property investing and management. Professionalism requires a specialist body of knowledge. This specialist body of knowledge must be found in books and journals and research undertaken with academic and independent rigour, not presented by sponsors run by conflicted peak bodies. Written and taught, this information must be prepared by vocational educators and academically qualified lecturers, not delivered to you by suppliers selling their wares. It must have a curriculum that goes beyond what the legislation says we must do, and it must include the things that make strata management special. The science and theory of collective decision-making, the psychology of persistent complainers, meeting craft, and the art of getting people to make quality decisions. There must be high educational standards. Beyond Cert 4, we need a diploma. We need subjects taught at university, not about strata law, although that's welcome, but about strata management, about what you do. Those courses need to run over several years. People need to fail these courses because they didn't work hard enough. They must be meaningful. We must have public-focused ethics. I was taught that ethics is about the difference between right and right. Not between right and wrong, but between what's right and what's also right. It might be right that the legislation says that you can charge a commission for engaging and arranging insurance. But is it right by modern professional standards and by the public's perception? And the answer is no. Independently, I would add this to Pound's list, that the ultimate determiner of professionalism is, of course, the public. It's not government licensing schemes. It's not government regulation. It's not determined by the Professional Standards Board. It is determined by the public and how they perceive you. And at the moment, whilst we suspect they perceive you poorly because of the media attention, the truth is we don't really know. The last work that was done on the public's perception of strata managers was done by Hazel Easthope in 2012. That was a long time ago, and a lot of things have changed since that time. And as bodies interested in strata management, we must spend money researching and understanding what our base point is. What are we dealing with? What do people really think about us? What do people really think about us when we're not at the table looking them in the eye? These are the things that we need to ask if we are to drive professionalism. I want to talk about some things that professionals don't do. The first is that professions don't quote. If you're advertising on your website a free quote, there is nothing better than you can be doing to de-professionalise the industry. Nothing better. Professionals don't send quotes, professionals send proposals, and they send cost disclosures. Particularly, this is the case if you're giving a quote of information you've recovered on a website without actually talking to a human. That stands for commodities. That's what people selling commodities do. It's not what professionals do. Professionals don't sell their services or tasks. They sell value propositions. My orthopaedic surgeon didn't sell me a titanium knee, nor did he sell me a knee replacement. He sold me mobility. To charge like professionals, we must discover the value that we can provide, not the price that the client has been paying your competitor and is about to leave. Professionals don't work for free. When I was in a strata manager's office recently working, I was astounded by the variety of calls and issues that the managers were dealing with. When I looked at their profit and loss statement, I knew that they were not recording their time and they weren't charging what they could be. I think there's two reasons perhaps for this. The first is that internally and externally, we are confused about what is in and what is out of scope. Largely that's driven by our agreements. And with respect, Christine, I don't think the industry agreements are up to standard. They're poorly drafted, they're confusing, and in some respects they're unfair. Yours is a lot better than SCA's. But the SCA agreement is a disgrace. I recently looked at an agreement by a big strata management company. It was 21 pages long. it disclosed 27 related parties without telling me how they charged for their services. And it had no fewer than 62 items of charge. And this for a building with a value of $7.5 million and a base fee of less than $4,000. Absolute absurdity. We need to develop a confidence in what we do if we are to be regarded as professionals, and we need to overcome our fear of losing a client. We should all go back to our offices tomorrow, tonight have a drink, but tomorrow go back to your office and sack 20% of your clients. They're the 20% that are annoying you, that are toxic, that distract you, that keep you from doing good work for good clients. Professionals don't take commissions. The argument is not that you don't deserve to be paid. Most commentators, me included, think you should be paid more even than your base fee with all of your extras. It's the way it's done. It won't be government that changes the rules on commission. They'll make it harder and they'll make it more confusing for both you and clients, but it will be the new entrants to the market, the people that are peeling off big strata now and have done over the last couple of years. They're the ones that will change insurance. They're the ones setting up businesses that are not dependent upon insurance commissions, and they will speak about it loudly. Professionals don't have related party transactions. Related party transactions do not involve a question of disclosure. Disclosure only exists to manage conflicts. It doesn't extinguish them. Related party transactions cannot be managed by disclosure because of their ongoing nature. So as people continue to sell debt collection processes and fire safety reports and valuations and the like, they're not telling people at every point, at every transaction, what they're taking, how they're taking it, and why they're taking it. I'm at a loss to understand, given your Property Agents Act provisions and conflict of interest requirements, clause 11 if I recall correctly, I'm at a loss to understand how people can enter into a contract for a related party transaction and manage a strata entity. There was a time in my life when I was a lawyer, and I worked as a lawyer in the morning, and I owned strata management businesses, and I worked as a strata manager in the afternoon. I had 11 businesses in 4 states and managed 28,000 apartments. The same guy with the same experience and the same Italian suit was treated well in the morning and disrespectfully in the afternoon. In the morning, I earned $600 an hour and had people queued up to pay that. In the afternoon, I made 60, and it was begrudgingly. The difference was not that I didn't know how to sell services to strata. I've been doing that all my professional life, and I do it well. It was that the time for strata professionalism had not arrived. There was no clear public purpose. There was no defined body of knowledge. There was no high standards for education. There was nothing. And the time for strata professionalisation has come. It came on the 21st of March when the ABC triggered inquiry. That inquiry will be sustained. It will not go away. It will change the way we do business. And for strata managers, we need to become more professional if we are to profit and deliver better services. Thank you.
All right, we have an opportunity now to quiz our friends here on their knowledge, so we don't want to let that opportunity obviously through our fingers. So, what do you see as the biggest challenge in Strata going forward? So, in the next 18 months.
Probably the biggest challenge is making sure that you're up to date with the legislation, because the legislation is changing all the time. And I think that you need to keep your foot on the ground with that, because there's certain parts of legislation that I can't talk about yet that is probably going to come in, which means that it's a bigger risk for you if something does go wrong. So I think you need to keep your feet on the ground with that and make sure that you're doing everything right. Read your legislation, understand it. If you don't understand it, we've always got a helpline. If you can't get through on the helpline or the helpline can't answer it, pose your question into the Strata chapter. You know, we can always find out the correct answer for you. We won't give you something that's not correct. So that support that I discussed in my speech, it really needs to come through. So I think the biggest challenge for you is making sure that you're up to date with the legislation and doing everything correctly. If it doesn't feel right, don't do it. Even if you're being told to do it, don't do it. Don't ever sign anything that you don't feel's right, or you haven't read. I was taught very, very young in management that you don't sign a document without reading it. And don't ever do that, because you don't know what you're signing. So it's the same thing in the business that you do. Strata legislation or strata management is scrutinised very closely, and it's very legal, it's very complicated, it's challenging, and it's rewarding. It's brilliant, and I love it. As you know, I'm very passionate about it, but the thing is, that's the advice that I can give you at the moment. So make sure you're on top of your legislation, and make sure you're on top of your work, and make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. Thank you.
Michael.
I think the biggest challenge is margins, profitability margins. They're going down. This microphone's terrible. They're going down, not up, for the first time in Strata history. You don't make more money by getting bigger necessarily. And so I think it's about staffing. That's the real issue. Finding staff and paying staff enough to do what you do. It's a very, very hard job. And we have to work on making it an easier job and a more rewarding job and a more fulfilling job. If you're a task-orientated person, it is a fabulous profession. But not if you're getting 150 emails a day from people that have gone to a meeting and go home and have 2 Chardonnays and get angry. And it's not a rewarding profession if you're working every night and all weekend. So I think staffing levels and workflow systems to make our world better is the challenge. And I think when we get that done, and we can only get that done by making more profit, when we get that done, I think we'll be in a happier place than we are right now.
Yeah. I was pleased yesterday, a day before, I can't remember, that ASQA put out something in the education space. I don't know if anyone has seen it yet, but it said that the property services industry, the RTOs out there, you know, when you see it coming through on your feeds constantly on social media, become a real estate agent for $149. You know, that's crazy. It's insulting to those people that went to TAFE for 3 years to get their qualification. Yeah, my friend here. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You know, like how can you go from 3 years at TAFE to a few days, to a few hours? I mean, who is the big loser? The consumer and the reputation of our industry are the two things that lose. The RTOs, they just wind the handle and pushing them out. Now they said in this particular document that they put out that they are now going to have a focus in this area, and yes please.
In which area?
In the property services industry. You said a while ago that people should fail when no one fails currently.
That's right. That's my point.
But you said people should fail. I know when I did law at Sydney Uni, and I remember this. They said, look left, look right. When you graduate, they won't be there. And that should be the case.
It's almost 40 years since I got my law degree, and I still have dreams that I failed my last exam. I'm 62. It is ridiculous. I want to say something just in response to Tim there. Tim's talking about property services. This is a chapter of Strata managers. Real estate and property management has a 3-year TAFE course. We have, 3 months at best, part-time Cert 4. This is my very point. You know, strata management is an incredibly complex discipline. And education standards at the moment, with the best will in the world of dedicated people on various peak bodies, and with the best will in the world of some RTOs, some of whom I've had the pleasure of working with, are not providing useful information. The information is too low even for Cert 4 level. It's certainly not high enough for the delivery of professional services for high rates and for value propositions. And we just have to be honest about that. The curriculum needs to be looked at from a strata management perspective, not a real estate perspective. It needs to be looked at from a strata management perspective. It needs to teach things that are relevant to strata managers, and it needs to go beyond interpreting law. It needs to go to how we do our job, why we do our job, the science of dealing with people, and how do we get it better.
And can I just add something to that? I went back to university and I did a 4-year degree in business, majoring in accounting. And I did that purely, and I passed it with flying colours at my age, which was great. I led 3 teams in that to success, and I think that, you know, that was the most rewarding thing I did. And the reason I did it is exactly what Michael just said. You've got to, in Strata, you can't think like a real estate agent. I do real estate, I do sales, rentals and Strata. I'm qualified in all, auctioneering, and I'm also a stock and station agent. So the thing is, you can't think like that. And when you're working in Strata, you need a background in accounting. You're managing budgets. You're managing huge dollars for people. So much money, and you need to know what you're doing, because guess what? If you're in charge of your agency, the buck stops with you. You need to know trust accounting. You need to know tax. You need to know all those little things. In Strata, you come across it all. And the thing is, you can't give people any advice, or you can't lead the Strata team down at the path if you don't know what you're doing. That's why accounting is so important, and that's why I did it. And that business degree and that accounting, major in accounting, and I also did the CPA as well, that is absolutely brilliant, because it does help you to understand exactly what you're doing in Strata. So yeah, you've got to think outside that Strata, outside the if you're in real estate and you're swapping to Strata, or you're including Strata in your business, then you need to put your Strata cap on, and that's totally different to real estate or property management.
You actually reminded me of something there, and I guess one of the advantages that the REI has is we represent a number of areas of practice. We had a presentation recently, the board did at least, from the AIC, Australian Institute of Conveyancers, came along and said, we would like to work with you better. And hey, that makes sense. We're in a transaction, aren't we? So everybody's trying to get to the same location, but there are pain points, aren't there, along the way? We're looking over the fence going, how the hell do they do that? Why do they do that? Why is it so difficult? And we look at it, and she waved the sign at me down the back, get off the stage, and now you've made me think. She did. You see her do that? So she said, but the point that I'm trying to make is that the point that I'm trying to make is that we bring all the various areas of practice together in trying to get to the same same space, and we can talk to one another. So we have the Resi sales people talking to Strata, and we have Resi sales and Strata now being able to engage with the conveyancers. We're all in the same place. We're trying to achieve the same thing.
That's
Can I
right.
ask a question?
Yeah.
One thing that I think is not covered by REI or by the various practices is asset management or building management.
Absolutely.
And that's something that obviously a strata manager needs to understand, but as with so many things that we do, we're not really taught what we need to do when we qualify to become real estate.
We get so many.
So, and you've got that, you've got so potentially a skills and knowledge shortage in the industry, plus you're not charging enough, particularly if you do have those skills and knowledge, you're not charging enough to actually demonstrate or be rewarded for the value you can add to running a building or a complex. But then you've got the other side of the equation here, which is your consumers, your owners, who are resisting, as Michael brought up earlier, investing in maintaining and improving their buildings. So I think you talk about challenges, that seems to me to be an enormous challenge because you've got fee pressure, which is why the strata manager has been going around signing up all these other arrangements. You've got owners that perception-wise don't want to pay more. And then you've also potentially got a skill gap too, and so why would you pay more if somebody doesn't know enough? So how do you pull all those things together as an industry to raise the bar?
Well, I think, I hope that I started some debate about that tonight. And I think it's about learning and having confidence in ourselves and learning how to sell our services for what they're worth. As I said, the race to the bottom has been going on for 39 years to my knowledge, and I've been to countless meetings like this where people have talked about not being paid enough. And if you're following the social media at the moment, you'll see that there's been a real outbreak in strata managers speaking about not being paid enough. But what I'm reading is people demanding to be respected. I'm not reading about people wanting to learn how to be respected. And there's a big difference. And so we have to stop the thing about saying, strata owners should pay more money because their assets going up in value and our job's getting harder. Stop whinging and do something about it. The something is believe in yourself, take incremental steps. Achieving the gap that you talked about is really hard. And hard things are done incrementally. They're done by daily practice. They're done by small, achievable targets. And we have to go to our work and do something different every day to make the difference. And we will get there. There is no reason why strata managers should be selected on price, other than the way you sell your services, you deserve to be selected that way, is the blunt truth. Quotes, fees, matching people, hiding costs, having to go to 5 different places on the P&L to find out what a strata manager is actually charging, and then not seeing what's not on the P&L. These are practices that are just not acceptable, and we have to change them. And we can change them because what we do is really important, and most of you do it really well. But learn how to tell people that and when to tell them. There's a way of doing that. As a solicitor, I did not scratch my backside unless a client paid me. I charged them when I thought about them having a shower. I was naked, and I was thinking and charging clients. We have to change the way we think.
Well, on that, are you going to...
Michael, do you think with the number of acts and legislation that it's all becoming a lot too complicated, especially for the smaller schemes, and there's a much bigger focus on the larger schemes, which is I think the OC and the SCA focus on, and do you think that should be sort of, particularly in Albury and Wodonga, the smaller schemes should be treated differently?
I think you've raised a good point, and I'm preparing my PhD proposal at the moment, and it's on that very point. Thank you. You and the Insomniacs Association are the only people that have endorsed it so far. But I'm studying and I'm looking at America, England and Australia. And I'm answering the question, has it just got too hard? And what flows from that? How do we get volunteers? How do we get volunteers to make quality decisions about these very complex animals with the relative lack of support that we have, particularly from government? And it's interesting to look around the world and see interventionist behaviour coming from regulators. Regulators in America becoming more involved in the actual schemes, decision-making process. Now, schemes there are bigger than ours, but the big schemes are coming under pressure from banks, from mortgage insurers. There's a blacklist down to a very granular level where they won't lend money to any purchaser in that building if the strata due diligence doesn't show certain things, including the amount of debts outstanding, unfunded maintenance, insurance with carve-outs. These things are being highlighted in America and are stopping banks from lending to purchasers. Now that's going to have an enormous effect. Will we get there? I don't know, but usually we follow them. So no, well, build to rent's another issue we could talk all night about, but you know, build to rent is being seen as an alternative to strata. Yeah, I wrote a book in 2015 about how owners should be thinking about strata, and I wrote in the introduction to that book that in all my time I had never been at a conference where people had discussed the end of strata, where people had discussed what might be the thing that brings the system down and another system emerges. And I think we're approaching that zone when buildings are falling over and killing people, and when buildings are being covered in cladding that's not being removed. Then you know we are approaching a very important time in our urban environment, and as a society, I think we have to get better. So what's the answer? The answer is definitely a trend away from self-determination. I think there should be some segregation. Victoria's doing some interesting things about small schemes.
The 7 lots you don't have to have a...
Yeah, there's some interesting things in Victoria. Queensland tried to do it but stuffed it up. So you know, there's I think need to think about buildings in categories and segments, and learning how to deal with the particular issues that pertain to particular buildings. Back to specialisation. When we do that, we can claim to be specialists. I specialise in small schemes. I specialise in mid-sized schemes that don't have lifts. I specialise in mixed-use developments that have corporate institutional owners. You know, these are the things that lead to professionalism, and these are all opportunities we can. You know, my speech tonight was intentionally confronting and confrontational, because I think we need to have a really, really honest debate and an honest talk about what we're doing. But that's not to say I'm not optimistic. I see enormous opportunities for strata management, enormous opportunities, but not if we keep doing the same thing.